This video contains 2 interviews conducted by Othernaturals in their investigation of the Farley twins' haunting of Parkerville, Missouri, Season 4, Episode 4, Othernaturals.
To begin with, I'll introduce myself. I am Leslie Baxter Pine, President of the Homeowners Association for the past 5 years. We moved to this neighborhood in 2006. This is a new neighborhood, though it is located on what used to be grazeland for cattle around the town of Parkerville. But in the past 2 decades, this area has become very popular due to construction projects in both directions, north and south, on the highway. So a lot of houses were built here in 2005, 2006, and thereabouts, before the housing crash. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. Hills of Oakview has a terrific homeowners association, and we take great pride in our neighborhoods, making sure we keep everything neat and orderly and keep the property values up. We do things like ensure that nobody adds any unsightly features to their home or yard, that lawns are maintained and pets are kept under control, and things like that. We deal with complaints too, which is how it came to our attention that there was a problem on the walking trail. A beautiful walking trail that is laid out throughout the neighborhood on the common grounds, surrounded by our beautiful trees and foliage, kept clean by the lawn crews so that it affords our residents a safe, beautiful, and healthy walk any time of the year. We consider this to be a chief selling point in our neighborhood, seeing as exercise and community are so important, and what with childhood obesity and all. For the most part, by and large, this is a perfectly gorgeous walking trail that increases the value of local homes. However, it came to our attention as far back as 2006, when I had just moved in with my family. I wasn't the HO president then, but had signed up for the committee as soon as we moved in. But anyway, we had heard that there was some disruption in the lower 2 miles of trail. Now, 2 miles sounds like a lot of trail, I do realize. This, however, was a long section of trail that covers our neighborhood on the west side and joins up eventually with one of the state park trails. And to make this happen, we extended the trail beyond the required area because we thought this would afford our residents a really lovely place to ride bicycles and walk with their families. Therefore, we have a long stretch of trail that is somewhat wilder than the other sections, and of course there are warning signs posted. No, not exactly warnings, but certainly alerts that this section of trail is no easier. It's longer and does lead somewhat away from the neighborhood common grounds, and of course we carefully mark it with indicators so that our residents do not get turned around. Well, as it happened, complaints were coming in of 2 children who were playing recklessly along this section of the trail, purposely trying to frighten or startle walkers, and then hiding when adults would confront them about it. The report stated that these children, a boy and a girl, would follow walkers on the trail or appear far in front of them on the trail, and would sometimes scream very aggressively and loudly at the walkers or would pretend to be hurt. One of them laying at the side of the trail, and the other standing over and pretending to be summoning for help. However, the walkers or the joggers, whenever they would get close enough to the children to see what was happening, the children would disappear into the woods, sometimes very suddenly, or just when the walker was turning aside or looking away. Well, the point was that no one could ever get close enough to these children to identify them. But we did have several unhappy reports of this reckless behavior, which we did not want to continue because we have families out walking on that trail, people with small children, and also there are elderly people, and sometimes people with dogs that can be upsettable. Now, as is correct, the first thing we did was try to notify parents that somebody's children were getting out on the trail and causing trouble. And at very odd times, too, we had to assume that these were children who were not being carefully looked after, or that this was possibly a case of neglect. The walkers all commented that the children, from a distance anyway, appeared to be about the same age and have the same color of light blonde hair, and 1 or 2 of the reports claimed that the children were well dressed and in matching clothes, as if heading off to Sunday school, which it sounded to me as if they could certainly use. Well, anyway, the children would only appear at dawn or at dusk. At dawn, it was always the joggers who saw them, and at dusk, usually it was walkers or people with dogs. These are both times that, to my mind, children should be inside their homes, if not outright asleep. Well, we couldn't find out who they belonged to. However, as much as we tried, including some actions that my husband joked were covert, but it wasn't just me driving up and down the streets to see if I could catch sight of them coming in or out of a house. I wasn't the only one who did that. Anyway, that did not produce any results. What was crazy about this was that the reports continued, and they have gone on ever since that first year that the trail was built. They happen at all times of the year, often once or twice a month. Someone will report seeing these children. Since it's been 8 years since the neighborhood was built, you do have to wonder about this, especially since the children are always reported as being still about the same age, around 8 or 9 years old, though some people have said their voices sounded older, so they might just be petite children. And they're always dressed up, compared to the other children anyway. It's a neighborhood tall tale. The pranks have gotten very serious. One man reported actually seeing one of them lying in a pool of blood, and some of the younger residents, the children of our neighborhood, the ones who are watched carefully, swear that the little girl has chased them, although I think children will tend to exaggerate, but nobody ever gets close enough to catch one of them at it. Naturally, after all this time, and with the fact that the children never change, it has turned into our local ghost story, and we've had all kinds of people out there at dawn and dusk, all kinds of people walking the trail and trying to catch sight of them, including many ghost hunters, which does not do much for our property values, and I, for one, have petitioned the mayor to try to get this sort of behavior to stop.
The following is an interview done by an elderly resident of Parkerville who wishes to remain anonymous.
My father and grandfather were both school teachers, so I was accustomed to hearing stories about their students. They would share the funny stories over supper, but the stories of the Farley twins were not funny, not shared over supper. No, they were not. Grandfather would tell us the stories of the Farley twins when we were acting up, and he would say, "Behave yourselves, or the Farley twins will come to play with you," and this was not something you wanted to happen. Grandfather would tell of them like others might tell campfire stories, and we children would always talk about the Farley twins as if they could still be somewheres in town, ready to kill us or kill our pets. My grandfather had them in his class at school for 3 years. He was their teacher, and he said he had never met more mean-tempered or cruel children in his life, and that he had tried more than once to see if he couldn't get them removed from the school because they disrupted classes for the other children. He said they commonly liked to scare people and would pretend to be injured, going so far, he said, as to use real blood on themselves so as to make it look like they'd been cut or hurt. And the blood sometimes came from livestock, but there were a great many tales of pets going missing whenever those Farley twins were around. The problem was, I reckon, that their family had just enough money to take care of the troubles they caused, either that or just enough to bully everyone into ignoring it. Parents just told their children to stay away from the Farleys. That was the only way to be sure, and the children learned fast to do just that. There were more injuries around those twins than anyone else. Not just children getting hurt, but adults too. Things that just seemed to be like bad luck until you started to notice that the Farley twins always seemed to be nearby. And there was some hope that once the children became old enough, their bullying would stop. And Grandfather, when he'd say the word bullying, he'd always laugh. He'd say, I reckon that was some of the worst bullying I'd ever seen. Those terrors drove good children away from school, and that's the truth. That's just how that's how frightened they were. Grandfather said that when the Farley parents died of the influenza, the town could hardly wait to be rid of the twins. It was almost cause for celebration. Those two little monsters would be going elsewhere. Even after the day of their parents' burial, no one in the whole town would volunteer to let those Farley twins stay over till the uncle came to get them, as he was supposed to come on the train to fetch them. They were not wanted in any decent home. They were left alone in their own house, with someone looking in on them, or so it was supposed to be, but it's likely no one did much checking on them. Then the children just vanished into thin air. Some people assumed that it was the uncle had come and fetched them in the middle of the night, and the thing is, nobody ever did try to find out. Grandfather said, when he'd tell us his story, 50 years later, a rumor had gone around town. They'd been kidnapped by old Jack Scratch and taken exactly where they belonged. And if you don't behave yourself, they'll come and get you too.